Part 2, The Pursuit. Chapter 6, Observation Indoors. Observation is so closely linked to tracking as to be inseparable. Therefore, I think it only right that before I proceed to tracking drills proper, I spend some time explaining how to develop the powers of observation. This training can be undertaken in 2 stages. This chapter will deal with the first stage, the indoor stage. It is an added bonus for the teacher or youth group leader that you can progress with your tracker training course during the evenings or when the weather precludes outdoor activities. A great deal of the indoor training revolves around the memory and observation training technique known as Kim's game. This can mistakenly be considered merely as a party game, but I can assure you that it is used as the basis of memory and observation skills training by some of the best surveillance units in the military. Kim was the hero of the eponymous tale by Kipling. He was being trained for his Secret Service work on behalf of the British Raj in the Great Game. His training was conducted using stones on a tray. Now, slides and video clips are used, but essentially the training is the same. The advantages of Kim's game are that it is easy to conduct and it can be carried out indoors. It is directly relevant to tracking in that it develops and sharpens both observation and, just as important, memory. Before I lay out the practical details for conducting Kim's game as a training session, it would be beneficial to explain some of the basic principles of memory. Memory training. If you're aware of some of the key processes that take place when you use your memory, you can take steps to improve its efficiency. It is worth spending some time studying the best ways to enhance your own memory. Although individuals differ, certain broad principles should be kept in mind. Memory is the process of storing and retrieving information, or retention and recall. Storage techniques. Associationum. The more facts that are associated with the object, the better the chance of the object being remembered. And I'm just going to spell that out. Associationem. So I never read that. I don't know if that's a typo. But association M. Groupings or clusters. Organize in your mind similar items in a group. Visualization. Imagine some visually vivid image of the items you are trying to remember. Retrieval techniques. The Greek system of a familiar room. Imagine a tour around a room you know intimately and associate the facts you are trying to remember with items in the room. Knot in the tie or some item that is out of place. This immediately triggers the memory. Mnemonics. Produce your own mnemonic lists. Recall is state-dependent, that is, we recall better if the state we learn the facts in is the same as the one in which we are trying to recall them. Memory is either short or long-term. Phone numbers are designed to use the short-term memory function, so they are usually broken into chunks about 6 digits long. The physiological processes that come into play to transform from short to long-term memory are beyond the scope of this book, but it is worth noting from a practical point of view that there are 2 sorts of memory. For instance, you may think that you have remembered some feature of the sign you observed 3 hours before, but it may have registered only in the short-term memory, and you may not be able to recall it later. Another important part of the memory that we must be aware of is its opposite, forgetting. This is defined as when information becomes inaccessible. It may be inaccessible because it is no longer in storage or it cannot be retrieved. Forgetting is a vital function, otherwise we would be overloaded with every sensory stimulus encountered. Factors involved with forgetting. Time. Interference. Similar things interfere with each other, e.g., 2 vehicle registration numbers. Distortions. Due to what the person regards as most important. We try to reconstruct events into a previously recognizable pattern as opposed to what actually happened. E.g., if a man passes a parcel to a librarian, we record it as being a book because that is what we are expecting. Memories can be entirely false. Memories are not fixed but change over time and can also be affected by other memory inputs. We all have a memory, and it is a faculty that, with practice, can be improved. Exercises that allow us to make better use of our memories, consciously or subconsciously, are fantasy. A green limousine is remembered as a crocodile and the 3 passengers as 3 birds on its back. Visualization. It is easier to recall concrete images, so try to see the vivid red of the mailbox that the man went to before he strode across the wide street to the sparkling lights of the restaurant. Association. To remember a series of keywords in the correct sequence, link them in your mind to articles in a room with which you are very familiar, ensuring that they are in the sequence you would see walking through the room. Exaggeration. This is ideal for remembering the features of a person. If the person has long fingers, this is remembered in an elongated fashion similar to how a cartoonist or caricaturist depicts his subjects. It is interesting that these are all positive acts. Memorizing information is not passive. We are not sponges, and although individuals have natural preferences for memorizing, some are more orally aware than others, while some find the sense of smell an evocative trigger. All of these exercises can be actively employed to improve memory storage and recall. For a detailed description of these techniques, I recommend you study A Question of Memory by D. Berglas and G.L. Playfair. There are good reasons for a potential tracker to study and improve his memory. As you move along the track, there will be many details of the sign. Some of these may appear irrelevant as you follow the 3 to 5 items of key sign, but when linked up to something further along the pursuit, they may become a vital piece of the jigsaw, indicating something very important about your quarry. For instance, you may be following the key sign of a booted man down a much-used track where there is a great deal of other sign, but every mile or so, a slight oval indentation about 3 or 4 inches in length appears alongside his boot print. If this was overlooked or not remembered, you may not realize the man was armed, that indentation being the butt of his rifle that he rested on the ground as he paused to read his map. Exercise your memory. Engage your powers of retention and recall information positively during your daily life. Memory isn't a faculty that gets worn out. Kim's Game. The basic standard layout for Kim's Game is 20 small objects placed at random on a cloth. The items should be from a variety of uses and backgrounds. The students are allowed to study them for 1 minute and then the articles are covered. They are then asked to write down accurate and full descriptions of as many of the items as they can remember. From the start, an emphasis should be placed upon accurate and full descriptions to engender an attention to detail. For instance, a small metal object is not sufficient for the description of a key. The type of description that should be aimed at is a Yale-type key, bronze-colored, with a slight crack halfway down its length. As a build-up, fewer, larger objects can be used. The exposure time can be lengthened, and the students can be asked to give verbal descriptions. Advice the instructor can give to the student after the first few attempts might be: count the number of items. Study the smaller things first. Group the objects. Don't hurry, keep calm. The instructor can vary the standard format of the game along many lines. Vary the types of items. Alter the method of arrangement. Use the floor, suspend them from the ceiling, scatter them around the room. Use slides and video clips. Play the game as a team. Spring the game on a group of people without any kind of warning or in the midst of another activity. Interfere with the memory by introducing another task or by planning a time lapse before writing the results down. Other variations on the theme are a fleeting observation of one single article. For example, a look at an envelope reveals the postmark, foreign or domestic, the writing marks on the envelope, the size, the shape, flat or bulging, the flap, the stamp, the color, and the quality of the paper. Asking participants to remember the details of a room. Before and after situations. What is wrong or what is missing. The use of distance by holding up articles at the opposite end of a room. Color can be utilized in 2 ways. First, to make an article insignificant by the fact that it is surrounded by other articles of more brilliant coloring, and second, to aid the memory by grouping things of the same color. These changes of conditions are an important factor in the advanced application of Kim's Game. They prepare the student for the reality of an incident. You are not warned beforehand that something requiring observation is going to appear or to happen. If you have acquired the habit of observation, you will have recorded it. If not, you will be left startled and remember nothing. The use of other senses. Most people's senses are dominated by visual stimuli, but, as has been stressed previously, the tracker must be open to gain information from all 5 senses. It may be one of the seemingly less significant senses, such as taste or touch, that provides the conclusive evidence. Are the ashes in the fire hot or cold? Hearing. The use of sight is not the only means by which the quarry's presence and activities can be detected. A trained tracker can gather valuable information by using his sense of hearing to locate the quarry. Trackers need to be trained to actively listen for sounds. They have to be able to differentiate between the natural and the unnatural. The following are some of the common sounds a tracker may hear: metal against metal, vehicle movement, human movement, chopping, human noises, birds calling, foxes barking and howling, animals rutting and digging, birds flying, fish, birds, and animals splashing. Visual information is presented directly to the observer. Although many of the above sounds will be instantly recognizable to a trained tracker, the use of hearing requires deduction on the part of the hearer. Only with practice and imaginative training will accurate information be gathered through hearing. The sense of hearing can again be sharpened by games conducted indoors. Noises Out is perhaps the best known and the most useful. All that is required in this game is for someone who is concealed behind a screen or behind a door to make a series of noises, either by dropping articles on the floor, or by moving articles about, or by using their mouth to make the sounds. The students are then asked to give their interpretation of what the sound represented, e.g., men whispering, a vehicle starting up, a man digging, cattle moving. The instructor can use tape recordings, but it is probably still better concealing the source of the noise by a screen and interspersing non-recorded noises into the sequence. Hunt the Watch is another game that can be used to simulate the concentration on hearing. Everyone is blindfolded and they have to search for a ticking watch. This game teaches some of the rudiments of stalking and brings home the importance of keeping quiet and moving quietly. This game helps develop a sense of direction by ear that can be practiced by various other means. For example, the group can sit in a wide circle with one of their number blindfolded in the center. He has to identify both the nature and direction of any sound made by the other members of the group. Again, the elements of surprise should be brought into the training. During a lesson, plan for a sudden noise to be made outside the room, and then say, "Now note down all you can about that noise." Important elements in describing noises are the tone and the rhythm. A potential tracker should be able to say whether one note was lower or higher than another. Smell. It is a known fact that hot air rises during the day and cold air sweeps down the valleys and ridges at night. Therefore, smells drift uphill in the daytime and downhill at night. It is helpful for you to know the type of smells that occur and that are made by you or your quarry. Taking this point further, the sense of smell can be a double-edged weapon in a tracking scenario. This point will be reiterated in the chapters on stalking and on military tracking. One method of training the sense of smell is to surreptitiously induce a noticeable and characteristic smell into the room during another activity. You record the reactions and comments. This will at least make the students aware of the necessity of keeping all their senses alert. Items that can be introduced are burned paper, an oily rag, fish and chip wrappers, cigarette smoke. Taste. Taste is related to and dependent on the sense of smell, but the only relevance that it has to tracking is that if your taste buds are impaired by spicy foods, it may also affect your sense of smell. It is all linked to having all your senses keyed up to a high pitch so that you are fully alert to your environment. Touch. Touch is an interesting and overlooked sense with which a tracker can gain valuable information, especially with regard to texture and heat. Cooking areas and sleeping areas can render a great deal of information about the age of the sign and how long the sites were occupied by the texture of the soil. Is it fresh or old? And if the occupation was more recent, how warm is the ground around the cooking and sleeping areas? There is an interesting, unsavory story about a French Foreign Legion tracker and their war against Algerian rebels. When he came across human feces, he would test its age by poking his finger into it. Whether heat was retained inside and or near the surface gave him some indication when the man defecated, and therefore an indication of whether the enemy was close. Detection exercises based on the use of touch not only lead to familiarity with shape and feel, but also encourage trackers to use their deductive powers to gather information. For youngsters, blindfolded obstacle races indoors are amusing and useful. Another exercise in touch is to let two blindfolded potential trackers loose in a room to find each other, and let the others watch it in complete silence. Those looking on will also learn a lot about feeling their way in the dark, one of the most important aspects being that when one's sense is restricted, others compensate, and therefore, in this exercise, hearing and smell will come into play. Another indoor exercise for the potential tracker is to find his way about in the dark, first of all in a known room and then in a strange room, or one in which the furniture has been rearranged. The fire service has practiced such drills with the very serious aim of being able to locate and rescue people in smoke-filled premises. The identification of various objects by touch alone should be frequently practiced. The articles need not necessarily be small. It is possible to identify a person by passing the fingers lightly over the face. The blind can do this very readily, just as they learn to identify a person by the sound of his voice or even the sound of his footsteps. In time, after much practice, it will be found that it is possible to sense obstacles in the way before they are even touched. I have attempted to demonstrate, especially to the adult responsible for training young people, that there is a great deal of scope for exercises related to tracking that can be carried out in either the winter, evenings, or during bad weather. The subject of describing faces and individuals will be dealt with in Chapter 8, but, as will be seen, it also affords great scope and opportunities for indoor work. A tracker must remember that his senses are his most valuable assets. It is important that all trackers continually exercise all their 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. They should avoid activities and habits that detune their faculties. While the senses are at a high pitch, not only does the tracker recognize the sign of his quarry faster, but his life is lived at a heightened state as he becomes more aware of his environment. Summary. Memory is the process of storing and retrieving information, or retention and recall. Storage techniques: association, groupings or clusters, visualization. Retrieval technique: the Greek system of a familiar room, not in the tie or some item that is out of place. Mnemonics: recall is state dependent. Memory is either short or long term. Forgetting is when information becomes inaccessible, either because it is no longer stored or it cannot be retrieved. Factors involved in forgetting: time, interference, distortions. Memories can be entirely false. Memories are not fixed but change over time and can also be affected by other memory inputs. Enhancing the memory: fantasy, visualization, association, exaggeration.